Notice right now set up that it's not just you here in the room. There's at least twice or more number of people watching this online. We're so glad that all of you could be here for our background report launch. And we will also be recording this because we already know that this is going to be a fascinating presentation to help kick off our topic this year. So let me introduce myself. My name's Tara Jackson. I'm president of the Arizona Town Hall. I've been in this role for almost 18 years, hard to believe. And it is always a fascinating and wonderful experience to be a part of whatever issue we take on. But this year might be one of the most interesting and fascinating. But let me start, if you're new to the town hall, whether you're online or you're here in person, with just a little bit about who we are, a quick overview. So let's go. Oh, I don't have my clicker. Sorry. If you could do that for me. So quick overview of who we are. We are a nonprofit organization, and we've been around since 1962. That's a long time, but our mission has not changed. How we deliver it has changed. Our mission hasn't changed, and I think many of us would argue it's become more important than ever. That's about educating from a nonpartisan, or you might say multi-partisan point of view, because we know we all have opinions, especially when we're involved in policy. But what sets Town Hall apart, what has stood the test of time, is our process of bringing all those diverse opinions together and figuring out what we have in common and how we can work forward together in a way that's not only best for our individual communities, best for our state, and in recent years with our international work, best for our region, including the region that includes our neighbors in Mexico, as well as other countries where we have been working with and sharing our process around the world. So that part hasn't changed, and again, is more important than ever. An important part of our process, what we're known for, is the consensus building, and that we believe all voices and perspectives are important as part of figuring out the solutions. So what has changed? Let's go to that next slide. In recent years, we have evolved from having either one or two statewide town halls a year on a topic where maybe there might be 130 to 150 people gathered, to something very different that is proved to be quite dynamic and impactful. And that is to travel around the state and sometimes to other countries to hold these community town hall events on the topic so that the communities not only own it, but have the experience of having this very productive conversation around difficult issues. And that the takeaway is not only on the topic itself, which is always something that's in the headlines, but the most important takeaway, I like to say, is experiencing what it's like to have a productive and constructive conversation around a difficult topic. So, what you see on the slide here is just some pictures from last year's topic of equity all around the state. You've got, I see Bullhead City up there. I see Nogales. I see everywhere in between. Not only community leaders and elected leaders, but our youth and students whose voices are always important and impactful. So we couldn't do any of this without a lot of support. Every program we do is in collaboration with multiple people. And when we go into a community, we work with the community to hold that program so that it is very much their program, and we're just there to assist in any way we can. And today we have a lot of partners here for this program. Our financial sponsors of this program, you'll hear a little bit more from them later, are Molina Healthcare and Vitalis Health Foundation, who have been wonderful partners for us in whatever topic we take on. The Morrison Institute has been a long-standing partner with us, putting together these amazing background materials that help set the stage for conversations. You'll hear a little more about them as well. And of course, physically, we're in the space here at the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership, and we're very happy always to partner and collaborate with them. And we have some financial partners who support us every year, regardless of topic, because they believe in the work we do. And just an acknowledgement to them for their longstanding partnership, SRP, APS, and really proud to be a regular partner with the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. So with that, I would now like to turn it over to someone who's been a part of the town hall for many years, whether as a recorder, a panel chair, the chair of our training committee for many, many years, and who has lent his talents and treasures to help us get to this new point where we are as we take on one of the most, I think, important topics we've done given the time. And that is our current board chair. He's an attorney with Sherman and Howard. Please welcome Greg Falls.
Thank you, Chara. I remember when we were looking at who was going to replace Shirley Agnos as the president of Arizona Town Hall, and there was lots of concern. Oh my God, how are we going to find somebody who's going to do as good as Shirley did for all these years? Well, we did. And so, Tara, thank you for the last 18 years. I didn't know that's what it was. But anyway, thank you. You're doing a fantastic job. And as she mentioned, we have expanded not only the number of people that we connect with, but also the ages, the groups, everybody from high schoolers through retired people. So thank you all for being here. I'm just going to say a few words and then we're going to get on to our program. But in between my words, we have a couple of speakers who are just going to briefly tell us whatever they want to say about their organization and this. The reason for today is the background report, kicking off the background report and kicking off a year of town hall events all over the state of Arizona. I have to admit, I'm kind of a background report nerd. I haven't read this one yet, although I did see an earlier draft. But I noticed there's a I voted sticker on here, kind of on Yuma or maybe a little bit east, Welton. And I wonder why that's where we put the sticker. But anyway, if you don't read these or if you haven't read this one, please, there's a lot of good stuff in every one of these. And even if you can't make it to a town hall, you can learn a lot just by reading the report. Okay. We pick our topics about 2-3 years in advance of the year where we're going to cover them. And lately, we have been so lucky to have been timely on every one of them. And I think you'll have to agree with me that voting and elections in Arizona is definitely timely to be discussed this year, not only because of the climate, both in Arizona and nationally, but also because it's a presidential election year. So let's have a robust conversation about that topic. The thing about town hall is we bring together everybody and we can sit in a room and have a peaceful conversation and try to find areas of consensus because we don't all agree on everything, of course not, but there are things we do agree on. Let's concentrate on those and build from there, and that's what town hall does. As Tara mentioned, we're being hosted here today, as you all know, because you're here, or if you're online, we're being hosted by the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership, and that's the Flynn Brown Fellowship Program. Thank you to them for hosting us. We've had a few events here, and they've all been good. They are a great partner, and again, thanks to all of you. We also we've done a good job lately in partnering with various organizations. And one of our partners is the Molina Healthcare of Arizona. And they are a fiscal sponsor of the background report launch, this event. And we are going to hear from Whitney Henziak. She's the senior specialist for health plan communications at Molina. And again, thank you, Molina and Whitney, please.
It's nice to get out. Molina Healthcare, we're 100% remote, so it's good to see faces in person. Thank you. And to all of you online, hello. It's great to be here. Before I get into, I actually have prepared remarks because I didn't want to forget to say things. Because what's happening here and with the town hall, this is important. And it's important for everyone to understand where we're coming from and what matters. I've actually been volunteering for town hall for a little over 2 years now, and I have seen this process unfold through homelessness, substance use, through equity, and it works. And I've heard a lot of voices from across the state, and it's so inspiring when you do hear them from the college age up to the senior level in demographics, that you're hearing what people really want to be saying and understanding and compiling that and taking it to where it needs to go. So thank you all for being here this morning. So grateful for that. Again, like Greg said, my name is Whitney Hinziak. Very good on the pronunciation. Thank you. That's actually my husband's fault. My maiden name is Roberts. So yeah, so I always commend people when they get that right. Thank you. I am with Molina Healthcare, and we are dedicated to providing government-funded quality healthcare to our neighbors. At Molina, we are committed to making an impact and improving the lives of those in the community we serve. An important component of making an impact is addressing social determinants of health. We are grateful to have organizations in our community that share our dedication to improving the lives of those in need and ensuring the health of all Arizonans. Thank you, Arizona Town Hall, for including us. That's why we're thrilled to support this event, highlighting the important role voting and elections play in initiating change so as to strengthen our communities, remove barriers to care, and ensure access to critical resources and services that people may otherwise not know about or be able to receive. We're grateful to team up with organizations in our community that share this dedication to improving the lives of those in need. We are a proud partner with Arizona Town Hall in their efforts to ensure individuals have those resources they need to make informed decisions as they participate in these processes associated with building a better community across our state, including everyone. Like we learned with equity last year, urban, rural, you name it, everyone's included. That's the beauty of this process. Molina shares the vision of ensuring everyone has the opportunity to participate in an inclusive and robust democratic process that can help shape health outcomes and increase access to care so that everyone can live happier and healthier lives. We are grateful for the chance to support our neighbors across Arizona and to help make the difference in the health and well-being of everyone across the state to the best of our ability. So with that, thank you to the town hall. We so appreciate being able to be a part of this and happy to support in any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. And again, thank you, Melina, for being a valuable partner to the Arizona Town Hall. Melina is not the only partner, and we also have as a partner Vitalist Health Foundation. We will hear from David Martinez III in just a minute. He's the Director of Capacity Building and Community Engagement for Vitalist. Vitalist is a sponsoring representative and David is a representative of Vitalist and also a chapter author for the background report. So he knows a little bit about this topic, but that's not it. You will, for those of you in the room, you will see on your tables, there are at least 2 Spark reports. Spark reports were in part prepared or David is responsible for them in some way or another. Those reports are interesting. Why primaries matter and what to do about it. The impact of primary elections on everyday issues. How's that for timely? Also, strengthening civic health in Arizona. The intersection of civic engagement and health. So thank you, Vitalist. And David, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm proud to be here on behalf of Vitalist Health Foundation with my colleague Sergio Paris, and to recommit our support of Arizona Town Hall. It's not lost on me, Tara, that there are 2 health-oriented groups that are main sponsors of this 2024 Town Hall. I think that goes, it's testament to why Vitalist Health Foundation especially has prioritized the concept of civic health and why we are recommitting our support of Arizona Town Hall on this important topic in this election year. Both the process of Town Hall in general is a commitment to this concept that we call civic health, which basically means how communities are coming together to tackle their toughest challenges, and in our case, to improve the health of their communities, our state, and ultimately our country. So the process of Town Hall is just in itself very important. This topic is very important as well, because as you'll read in my particular chapter of the Town Hall report, but certainly elaborated upon in the Civic Health Spark reports and complemented by the primary election Spark reports, research is showing that there is a new way to keep healthy, and that's by voting. So the concept that in just one vote on one day can impact your health for a lifetime is a message that we will be spreading across the state of Arizona this year and in collaboration with Town Hall. And this is all part of this growing body of research and movement that is making this connection that a healthier democracy contributes to healthier people, that you can read more about in the report and the correlative data that shows that case. But why does this really matter? As you'll read, Arizona's health isn't as strong as it can be because just 66% of us voted in the 2020 election, and just half of us voted in the midterm elections. So if we want a healthier population, healthier policy outcomes, we need to increase that voter engagement. Voter outcomes also have direct policy implications that affect our health. Nearly 45% of our state general fund budget is from federal resources that are driven to programs that directly impact the health of Arizonans, like Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, the old food stamps program, temporary assistance for needy families, or cash assistance, our healthcare system, access to state Medicaid, Medicare, child health insurance programs, and then the broader federal programs that are part of the social determinants of health, like transportation, healthy local foods, and whatnot. So there are direct policy implications, and there is this growing body of this growing movement to make this case. We have some good coverage. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services every decade outlines essentially a health strategic plan for our country. This next round is called Healthy People 2030. And for the first time ever, Health and Human Services has identified civic engagement, including voting, as a health factor to impact Americans' ability to live a healthier life. As part of that, they are deploying strategies like bringing together residents to tackle their toughest challenges, increasing voter registration and participation, removing barriers to inclusive voting policies to inspire that work. This concept has also been endorsed by pretty much every medical provider association, like the American Medical Association, the Association of Public Health of America, the National Association of City and County Health Associations, physicians, nurses. Everyone is agreeing that voting is one way to shape individual and community health. At Vitalist, as many of you know, we look at health as more than just health care. And this is really important because we need to integrate the physical, mental, and social determinants of health, including the concept of social and cultural cohesion, which includes civic engagement and voting. So just as we do to improve our physical activity, we exercise, we get out and enjoy the great open spaces that we have in Arizona. To increase our mental health, we maybe talk to friends and family, get a dog, see a mental health provider to increase our mental health. And for our civic health, what do we do to strengthen that? We need to flex our civic muscle. And one way we can do so is by engaging in community town halls and the Arizona Town Hall process, and by voting both in the primary and in the general elections. So we need to flex that civic muscle and show that civic health matters to Arizona. We're glad to be part of this. Thanks.
David, thank you for that message. I think you made my day. I don't recall ever missing an election, so I'm going to live a long and healthy life, and I'm excited by that. Again, thank you, David, and thank you, Vitalist, for partnering with Town Hall. We also collaborate with ASU and specifically the Morrison Institute of Public Policy. They have been instrumental for a long time in helping us write these background reports and coordinate that process. The editor this time was Lee Jensen Marino, and she's not here today because I understand she's taking care of a newborn. So that's good news, and it's also a good excuse for not being here. So she sent a proxy to talk to us. And of course, the proxy is none other than Andrea Whitsitt, who is the executive director of the Morrison Institute. And again, thank you for partnering with Town Hall. Andrea, we'll hear a few words from you, please.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here. As he said, I have the great privilege of serving as the executive director of Morrison Institute. I have actually been at Morrison Institute for 17 years now in various roles. So Tara, I think you have me beat by about a year. So those of you who may not be as familiar with our institute and what we do, we are a nonpartisan public research institute. We do applied public policy research. We're housed within ASU's Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions. And as an institute, we set out to analyze important public policy issues to advance public's understanding in Arizona and beyond. We consider the historical and current context for the issues that we're studying. We develop tools and resources because we want to help communities make informed decisions. And we also convene forums so that people can engage with our research. So you'll notice we actually have quite a few shared sort of mission and values with Arizona Town Hall. In fact, so much so that we're actually roommates. I don't know if everyone knows this, but post-COVID, they actually relocated. And so now we share some office space in the University Center building, which is just a few blocks from here on the downtown Phoenix campus. And it has really bolstered our ability to collaborate in many ways. So we've partnered with Town Hall. I have wrote down here for over a decade. Tara, it might be over 2 decades. I don't know. It's a long-standing relationship to work together on creating the background report. And I think what's important is we have a process that's very collaborative. So we actually co-create the report outline each year with the Town Hall Research Committee once the topic has been selected. And we want to ensure that what we produce doesn't take a particular position, but rather that we are providing people with sort of the fundamental information or sort of the primer that enables them to have a robust conversation. So each year when we start to develop the outline for the report, I would say we think about kind of 3 key things as to guide us. And that is we want the report to be fact-based. We want it to be descriptive, and we want it to be representative and ensure that we have a statewide perspective reflected in it. And so what does that look like? It means the report is crafted by experts. We are very fortunate that most of the content in this report is actually produced by guest chapter authors and then edited by the Morrison Institute team. And so we're very grateful for their time and their contributions, which are really done on a volunteer basis. And we want to ensure that those experts are producing chapters that are supported with data and with literature. The content is explanatory. It doesn't advocate for a particular approach or position. We sometimes joke internally that this means you won't find a lot of adjectives in a town hall background report. That is intentional. And then the report includes those statewide perspectives, as I mentioned. And so you'll note that authors of background reports tend to come some from nonprofits, some from academic institutions, not just ASU, and some from government entities. And that's important. So you know that the topic for this year's report was voting and elections, and I can't imagine a more timely issue that we could all be setting out to discuss in the coming months. So as I understand my role in today's program, it's really to give you a high level sort of walkthrough of the content that you can expect to find in the report. So this will kind of go in order, but bear with me. So chapter 1 sets out to discuss the current participation rates in statewide elections and civic education programs. And then it also explores some of the incentives and the disincentives for people to run for office or to serve in our state. Chapter 2 then looks at a community health leader's perspective, might be David Martinez, and his perspective on the bidirectional impacts of a thriving democracy on greater public health. Chapter 3 looks at some of the barriers that students self-report that they are facing and some of the solutions that they have come up with around bolstering civic engagement within their demographic. Chapter 4 provides an overview of how elections are run in Arizona, authored by Gina Roberts, the fabulous Gina Roberts, who you're going to be hearing from on the panel. And you'll see that in aggregate, these first 4 chapters are really designed to contextualize the landscape of civic engagement in our state and how some of our democratic systems currently are structured and functioning. So when we thought about kind of the flow of the report, we anticipated that as participants read these chapters, it may prompt some of them to consider potential reforms. And so to that end, in chapter 5, we present some alternative approaches that are used elsewhere in the process of selecting candidates. And then chapter 6 is a little more theoretical, and it's really offering kind of a political scientist approach to how do we identify democracies, how do we rank democracies in terms of what's working and how robust they are. And then finally, because we want the report to be practical, we want it to be a resource and a quick reference guide, we put together 5 appendices that you'll find at the end that look at some of the structures and systems within our state. One is looking at the Independent Redistricting Commission. One looks at campaign finance regulations. One looks at initiative and referendum here in Arizona. One looks at the importance of the free press, and one looks at the basics of the Arizona legislative process. So we hope that this report serves as a resource to enhance people's understanding of voting and elections in Arizona, and that participants will use this to inform conversations about advancing civic health and participation. So I want to say a huge thank you to Tara, to all of the Town Hall team, to Alex from Town Hall, who did a beautiful job designing the report that you have in front of you. I want to thank the Morrison team for their role in this. And yes, special shout out to Lee, even though she's home with her newborn. She did a tremendous job shepherding this through the process. And so a thank you to her. And to all of our chapter authors, because again, that is a lot that we ask of them. They all have full-time demanding jobs and many other things pressing on their time. And so we really appreciate their commitment to getting this report to be as strong and valuable as possible. And I look forward to hearing the following panel discussion. And then I always eagerly await, Tara and I will chat in the halls now that we work in the same space, but I always am eager to hear, most importantly, that feedback that we get from the community conversations that will ensue, because that really is what this is all about. So thank you. I will turn it back over to you, Greg.
Thank you for those comments. And thank you to Morrison Institute for everything you've done and are doing for Town Hall as a valued partner. Just a word for those of you in the room, as often happens to me, I'm double booked today. So after I introduce our moderator, you're going to see me sneak out. And the only reason is because I have another meeting I need to get to. That's all. I'm disappointed I'm going to miss the meat of this meeting, which is the panel discussion. To lead us through the panel discussion will be our panel moderator, and that is Deanna Villanueva-Saucedo. Deanna is the Associate Vice Chancellor, Center for Excellence in inclusive democracy for the Maricopa community colleges. So we partner not only with ASU and Morrison Institute, but Maricopa community colleges are a valuable partner also. And Deanna will introduce our panelists, who are all very impressive in their own right. And again, I'm sorry I will miss it, but Deanna, the floor is yours.
So welcome, everyone. Are you ready for this robust conversation? Well, that sounded a bit lukewarm. I'm not so sure. Are we ready for this robust conversation? So I have seen these three speakers in action, and so I feel silly calling myself a moderator because they're just going to run with it, and you will all be amazed and wowed. And in order to provide some additional context, I appreciate Morrison and the work that they do with the background report. I happened to be at a recent convening of higher education officials from across the country who work in the civic space. And as introductions were being made almost to a person, they talked about their reason for the work, this moment in time, save democracy. So I see all the head nodding in the room. There's this overriding feeling that we have somehow lost our way. And so I appreciate David's remarks around health. How can we restore the health of our communities by restoring a healthy sense of democracy? And so as much as we will have fun with this conversation, it will be a robust conversation. I think we also have to remember the charge that we have in front of us as engaged, active citizens in our community. How is it that we are saving democracy? How is it that we are helping to foster a healthy sense of democracy in the many communities in which we serve? And so I think it's just been a brilliant move under Tara Jackson's leadership to move to a series of community town halls so that we really are modeling what we expect when we talk about healthy democracies. It's not just an elite group of people that come together to have discussions, but we are entering into community spaces to encourage that community-based discussion. And that's a very different model than most organizations adopt. So how is it that we enter into diverse communities, underserved communities, young, old, all across the spectrum, different ideologies, different perspectives? That is what contributes to a healthy sense of democracy. So without further ado, let me call up our panelists, if you wouldn't mind joining me here on stage. Which one? You can pick whichever one. How about the three so we get you all on camera? This one was a little tight. Yeah. As they make their way forward, all the fans stopping to chat with them, give them high fives. You can take the center seat there. So Gina, if we could start with you, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the crowd, both here in person as well as the robust crowd online that's tuning in. If you could each talk about your role and what brings you to this moment in time here this morning, other than Tara's invitation to participate.
Sure. So my name is Gina Roberts, and I'm the Voter Education Director for Clean Elections. So Clean Elections, we are a state government agency, and we are charged with promoting participation in the political process. So my role is to oversee and implement an annual voter education campaign. So we talk a lot about voting, and you'll hear me talk more about this throughout the panel, I'm sure. But voting is obviously more than just filling out your ballot and casting it. We want people to be able to have access to the information so they can make informed decisions, right? There's a lot of important decisions made on every ballot. So that's some of the work that we do at Clean Elections. Hopefully you've seen our voter education guide that comes to your mailboxes, or maybe tuned into one of our debates or checked out our website. But our role is to really provide voter education to every Arizona voter, both on the logistics of voting and also how to vote informed. And so what brought me here today is I'm very grateful to work with Tara and with the Morrison Institute on the report. I was a contributing author, but I think it's really important to having this discussion right now, as we know we are in a presidential election year. We know turnout will be higher than in midterms. That's just typically the norm. But I think it's also really important in where people perceive democracy to be at right now and perceive elections to be at right now, that we continue to have these conversations. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Gina.
Stephen Richard, former estudiante de Selena, we used to be colleagues, and I made her give me Spanish lessons, so and correct my Spanish. I'm the Maricopa County Recorder. I was elected in 2020. I'm responsible for recording public documents in Maricopa County, voter registration in Maricopa County, and early voting in Maricopa County.
And what brings you to this moment in time here this morning, other than the gracious invitation?
Tara invited me, yeah, so, and I like Flynn Brown. Arizonans get to decide the fate of the free universe in 2024. So I don't think that that's that much of an exaggeration in that every single major national race will run through Arizona. And of course, when you're talking about Arizona, you're talking a lot about Maricopa County, because Maricopa County makes up about 62% of the voting population of Arizona. So we are unique in being the largest swing county in the United States, and we are a swing county inside of a swing state. And so there's going to be a lot of eyes, there's going to be a lot of money in Arizona, there's going to be a lot of questions, there's going to be a lot of national media, and whatever your confidence level in the voting process right now is, whether it's a 2 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, I want it to move up the scale by November. So that's part of the reason why I always accept opportunities like these. And it's part of the reason why we're doing education and information at a never before seen level in Maricopa County from our office, just because we want people, as long as we're making a fairly weighty decision about the fate of the free universe, we want people to feel good about that decision. So, or at least the process.
Thank you so
Even
much.
if you don't win.
Thank you so much. Yes.
I'm so sorry I forgot to add, and I feel terrible because I like to keep Don Wallace happy, but I am a Flynn Brown Fellow. So just the fact that we're in this space and I see other fellows here. So it's the 2019 fellow being represented here. So thank you.
And I interviewed Flynn Brown Fellows, but I've never been a Flynn Brown, or I am not.
Oh. Thanks, Stephen. And no, it's a perfect segue because I'm actually not a Flynn Brown Fellow, but I would love to be a Flynn Brown Fellow. So if anyone knows about that.
That was a well-dropped hint in the room.
Again, I've known Flynn for some time, incredibly amazing organization, but just briefly about myself, my name is Mike Noble. I'm the CEO and founder of Noble Predictive Insights, a nonpartisan private organization. Think of like what Andrew is doing over there, but on a much smaller scale. And by the way, the work that ASU Morrison Institute and Andrew has spearheaded is fantastic. Like I was reading through the report that you have right there, the hard copy, but also the link. Frankly, it's a fantastic resource, honestly. Like, and again, I live and breathe data, right? And so frankly, the stuff that's in there, it's a really comprehensive report, and it basically gives you all the foundational aspects. So if you didn't get a chance, definitely read it and keep that resource available. But for us, what kind of makes us unique in the space is that when I founded the research company 7 years ago, mainly because Arizona, at least on the private sector side, that they were always getting their work done by out-of-state folks. And for me as an ASU grad, and I don't know, I think Arizona is kind of the Wild West still, in my opinion. And anyway, so I think we should have had not only that option, but also I think we could compete with the best of the best in the industry. And what was it, last election cycle, we were ranked number 11 in the country for accuracy for 538, actually number 1 in the Southwest region, and number 4 overall in the country for least amount of average bias in the poll. So the best way to think of that is basically how close was your number to the truth compared to kind of pushing it towards the red team or the blue team, which there's some groups out there for that. But I really think we have a purpose there for us of like, again, educating, letting people with the facts. There's plenty of rhetoric out there, but again, giving people, the data, the facts, having a pulse on the electorate, I think is instrumental, frankly, because anyways, I think for them, that's how we're going to kind of pull ourselves out of this current bind that we're in. But anyways, enough about me, and pass it back to you.
So Mike, if you could just share with us, other than the invitation from Tara and Flynn Brown to be here today, what about this moment in time brought you here?
Oh, what brought me here? So I've known about Flynn for some time, but I'm kind of an odd duck. No, like my shoes, for example. Oh, sorry. I say, as you know, I'm a bit of an odd duck. Just look at my shoes that I'm wearing, for example. Let's see. By the way, I was born on the 4th of July, so I feel like I can get away with it. And it's interesting, like Flynn, It's not just working. I think like all of us work, right? I've always believed in kind of having a higher purpose of not just working, but again, to do these events and things like that. Like, again, you all took the time to come out here. I feel like I can make the time to make myself available for it, but that's also why I do. I think last year alone, we were published, or last election year, we were published like 4,000 times just in that year. I think just 3 weeks ago, we were actually on the cover story of Time magazine. That's the issue that has Biden riding the bicycle on the cover. And anyway, so with that thing, and you know, we did some exclusive polling for them. And it's just been a real privilege, but I truly believe of higher purpose in Flynn. And I think you've heard from other folks too, is that there's just a lot of synergy between, like, let's say Town Hall, Morrison, and Flynn. But I feel with my organization and its kind of core values align incredibly well with Flynn. And frankly, that's why I make the time, and that's why I'm here today. And hopefully, maybe I'll be a fellow too at some point.
Well, and we did previously with Tara, a town hall event, and so that was something that we enjoyed, and I think that was hopefully part of the reason why we're doing this again. So thank you for the invitation back. And does Time still print a physical magazine? Okay, all right. So I used to remember going in Tuesday afternoons and getting the Newsweek physical magazine, but I think those days are gone. So.
Thanks for dating some of us in the room, Stephen. Appreciate that. So first question, if Gina, we could start with you. If there's one item that you think from your individual perspectives, everyone needs to know in addressing this topic, what would it be? And I think you've already started to alluding to it. So the title, voting in elections, but it is more than that single moment in time. So what would you convey to folks?
That's exactly it, Deanna. I think, I really liked what David said earlier about flexing your civic muscle. If you want to work on, the health of your body, you're committing to exercise, to good nutrition, things like that. And I think the same thing applies for if we're committing to the health of our democracy. We have to commit our time. So again, democracy just doesn't end at the ballot box. We've cast our ballot and then it's over. It's more about dedicating the time in advance of the election to educate yourselves about every single issue that's on your ballot. And the ballot can sometimes be big. Maybe we're thinking two-page ballots sometimes. And you have all of those candidates on there. You have the ballot measures on there, trying to understand the effects of a yes or no vote. And that takes time. So it's not just, filling in the bubbles, but it's researching the candidates. It's watching them debate. It's reading the publicity pamphlet that the Secretary of State's office sends out to understand each of those ballot measures and how will this impact my community. It's also not just, once we get through that process, you educate yourselves, you cast your ballot. I think very importantly are, the next 100 days of the new year when our legislature is in session. And I think it's the commitment to staying engaged with the folks that won the election. It doesn't stop there. We have to continue to share what's important to us with the people that have been elected into office. Whether or not you voted for them, it's still important to stay active in sharing your voice about how do you feel about a particular piece of legislation? How will this impact your family? How is it going to impact, your pocketbook if we're talking about the economy here or social issues? And so I think it all comes down to, again, I'm going to continue to steal this term, but flexing your civic muscle and making sure that you stay engaged. And again, we are talking about a time commitment here. And everybody, our time is so valuable, our time is so precious. But considering that it's valuable and it's precious, so is our government, so is our community, so is our democracy. And so I think that's, time well spent, but we have to make that commitment.
Thank you. Stephen?
I think the founders had a very optimistic perspective of their fellow citizens. Now, obviously, what they defined as their fellow citizens was a bit different back in those days, but they put a lot of onus on the individual citizen to dig into these issues. I often remark when people are asking something about France, which is a lot these days in the elections community, that the average Arizonan will vote in more contests this year than most Europeans will in their lifetime. Gina remarked that we will have very long ballots in the upcoming election. For the November election, we will have over 80, maybe over 90 contests on the ballot. That will mean we will be going not just to 2 cards, but potentially to 3 cards, meaning that when you get your ballot in the mail, you'll have 1 page, flip it over, the 2nd page, then you'll have another card, flip it over, and potentially a 3rd card. Now, the reason for that is that we have some statewide initiatives that people are collecting signatures for. We also have some referrals from the state legislature on important topics. Prior to coming here, I thought it was because the state legislature and the governor weren't agreeing on things. But now that David has spoken, it's really just that they're interested in your health and they want you to engage in the civic process even more. And so they're putting a whole bunch of stuff on the ballot. But there is an incredible amount of burdens, may be the wrong word because that sounds negative, but there is a significant responsibility that is placed into the hands of the individual citizens. And it's a lot. That's a lot. I don't know if that's necessarily how I would design it. I wouldn't design a monarchy, but I don't know if I would necessarily vote for positions like mine, vote for positions like a state mine inspector. But that is the legacy that we have here in Arizona. And the exciting part of that is it gives you such opportunity, ample opportunity to have a direct voice in so many aspects of your Arizona government. So brace yourselves, but start early because there's going to be a lot. Everything ranging from how we do election administration and how candidates run, which is of interest to some of the people here, to, of course, abortion is going to be on the ballot, to minimum wage type issues, to, of course, candidates ranging from President of the United States to your local races as well. And school board races are is now a hot topic as well. So there are groups and websites and organizations, including the Clean Elections Commission, that publish information about the different offices. But it's going to also take some effort on your part, and hopefully that effort will be rewarding in a civic sense, and hopefully it will be rewarding, as David mentioned, in a mental and physical well-being sense as well.
Thank you. So Mike, what do you think people need to know when addressing this topic?
It can almost boil down, like we read through the report that you have there. You can't get the sense, I mean, it basically boils down to, it comes down to culture or values, right? Like it's almost, I almost liken it to, like the advertising campaign for, like Gila River or something, you can't win if you don't play. And I think that's kind of.
That's deceptive advertising.
It's
true, but it's like also you're problematic.
I mean, there's probably a little disclaimer on the ad, like what they run that. But to make the point, right? Like so you look at least the data, right? Like, because you look at it like from the report, for example, non-voters, we're talking about their barriers, right? Because we got a chunk of folks that are registered to vote, but they're just not engaging, right? What turnout was almost 80% last presidential, and then it was what in the high 50s, low 60s, basically during the midterms. And so you look at their biggest barrier was not interested. My vote wouldn't make a difference, and it's actually 6% higher than the national average. And we saw a big increase from 2020 to 2022. But think about what happened in between that time frame. It was the conversation that was going on. We were home to what well, you were definitely in it. 6 months for that Maricopa County audit, right? That election audit that frankly, there's nothing going on in politics at that time. So think of a serene lake and you throw a giant rock in there. That was basically, so we got a lot of attention, national and international. And so when you look at, some of these issues, like, the audit, I think could have created some little doubt or disenfranchised some voters, basically, with questions on it. And so, when you look at a lot of the other things too, like what are the things like older you are, the more likely you are to turn out. But think about what you got going on when you're, older. Usually you're a little more experienced. You also might have a little bit more time. You also know the value and importance of how it impacts you compared to like you all. When I was in my young 20s, admittedly, I didn't really follow politics because frankly, I was thinking about what am I going to do this coming weekend, right? What I,
Did you vote?
yeah, I voted in the presidential. I was one of those people. And so, every 4 years I'd come around. I'm young, okay, I'm old now. And so when you look at that, but also like educational, people that have a college degree, for example, which was cited in the report was only, people with a bachelor's degree, or higher was 73% turnout compared to only 47% of those that didn't have a college degree. So either, vocational, some college or high school degree or less. But that's a 26-point gap between the two educational groups. Plus, if you look at, let's say, our registered voter, the numbers on it, it's, I don't know, it's what 28% roughly of our electorate is, college degree or higher. So again, they're not the majority of the group. Anyways, but basically what I bring it all back to is that I really think frankly, events like this, that's frankly why I'm spending time here, is that it starts with us this, if it's important to us, and you also see in the report too, that when you talk about people are more apt to vote, be engaged, etc., if their friends or family were involved in that. So again, it goes back to this culture issue, right? But again, we can absolutely have an impact. It's just really that force multiplier. All of us in this room, we talk to, let's say, 5 people or so. Again, what does that impact have? So I think it's just really a value we have to put back of hey, the civics, all the data is there. You're healthier, you're gonna have a better community, you're gonna have all of these things. But again, you have to, people have to know the importance of it, right? But I think that's why we're here and talking about it today.
Thank you. So I love the idea that you touched upon civic health, from personal health issue, from healthy communities, healthy engaged citizens. So we're encouraging this high level of engagement. And yet we do have some public institutions, nonprofits, foundations, certainly governmental groups who shy away from entering into the fray, if you will, because they need to remain nonpartisan. And in some cases, there's Arizona revised statutes that dictate that certain entities do have to be nonpartisan. And this idea of institutional neutrality being cited in state statute. So where do you find the balance? What would you say in terms of this level of engagement that we're wanting to encourage, and yet limits on some organizations fully entering into the deep end of the pool? Mike, you look like you're ready to jump in on this one. Let's go ahead and start with you and come on down.
You read me like a book. It's funny when I looked at some of the potential questions for this event, I was like, I've been itching for this one. So thanks for asking it. And so there's really 2 parts to it. I think is that one is organizations, right? There's a stigma out there, which they're frankly not wrong, especially in corporate America, getting involved in politics, especially in the current environment right now, is that you're basically going to make mad half of the group and please maybe another half, right? Basically for business, if you're focused on business, it's not a good move to be directly injected into politics. But this is where the second part is. It's pulling apart civic engagement, this event or what the type of work that Town Hall does, or the work at Morrison Institute, again, trying to be a resource, educating on the fundamental dynamics, because when you read through that report, you can't get away. I mean, it's not leaning with an agenda, right? It's just, here are the facts, here are the numbers, and, make your own decisions from there. And so I think it's really the twofold portion. And I think organizations, I think they use that as an excuse, frankly, of, hey, I can't get involved in politics. And it's okay, I'm not saying go, support, let's say, Ruben Gallego or Carrie Lake or something like that. I would probably recommend not doing that. But when you look at, I'd say that other aspect of, the civic minded engagement. So just educating, informing, because again, what is partisan about, let's say, more people voting or having more access to the ballot box, or, groups that, for example, Hispanic Latinos are a massive population group in our state. But when you look at the size that they bat at on the electoral stage, they're definitely bat below their weight, right? But here's the thing, they're growingly increasingly better, because as they get, the 2 biggest things are, one is what generation are they, first, second, or third. As you become more enculturated, you end up becoming more engaged. But then also the other portion is a country of origin. For example, Cubans, they're basically MAGA folks, right? And then you have Puerto Ricans, are basically liberals, but then you have folks from Central South America, they're kind of more center left. And anyway, so I think that with organizations right now, I think just parsing that out, because I get why, because it is terrible for business wise to get into it. But again, I think you could make a lot of gains of separating out, hey, civic engagement, education, et cetera. Hey, going out and voting, volunteering, you know, go to bed, all the other different activities that you can do. You know, compared to actually pushing policies and agendas, right? So I think that's where I think there's an opportunity in the space.
Do those different groups vote at materially different rates, whether you're from Cuba, whether you're from Central America, whether you're from Mexico? I mean, you said they vote differently, but do they vote at different rates?
Rate wise, I didn't look at the rates, but when it comes to their ideological leadership.
Oh,
Sorry. I'm sorry. It was his fault, by the way. Jeez, that recorder. And no, so we didn't look at, I didn't look, so it's based on a study a couple of years ago. One of the goals was to look at, you know, what's a group that you can kind of move the most? Like the white vote has been just beat the crap. They're obviously the biggest group, but also they turn out at higher rates. But, you know, Hispanic Latino, you know, one, are they disaffected? And two, can you move them? So we did a national survey of like 2,000 Hispanic Latinos to kind of really dig into it. But yeah, when I looked into the exact rates, I didn't have that. But now I'm gonna go look it up.
So I would say, businesses have First Amendment rights. That's constitutional law. They can engage. Prior to running for this office, was an attorney, and prior to being an attorney, I was a business person. And the sense in business was exactly what Mike said, which is that politics is a third rail, that you absolutely shouldn't touch it because you would alienate a decent percentage of your customers, and that's not good. What I would say is that we often take for granted sort of the core pillars that exist in the United States, which to me are democracy, a market-based economy, and the rule of law. And I think that those core pillars, if you have them in place, allow both a country and businesses to flourish. And that's not true of many countries in the world still today, and they don't flourish. And if you go to parts of the world, you would see that they're living in what we would call squalor or poverty. And I think that those three core pillars are now a bit imperiled in the United States. And so I think it's actually even not only incumbent upon businesses as good members of society, but maybe now incumbent upon businesses as good business practitioners to say, not you need to vote exactly for this candidate or this policy is the right policy for this sort of bizarre regulatory scheme or something like that, but that you need to step up and you need to respect and you need to protect these broad institutional strokes that people are calling into question, that they have guided our country well, they have allowed businesses to flourish, and they need to be something that we need to be talking about as individuals, but also as businesses. And while I'm usually corporate America's #1 defender and still somebody who says, I like big business, which is not very fashionable anymore, I will say this has been one area in which I've been a little bit disappointed in big business, where maybe they've turned a blind eye to some things that I think imperil the future of the United States, or where they haven't gotten involved, where I think their voice would be very important for, again, not getting into the minutia of politics and not necessarily determining candidate versus candidate, but in emphasizing the importance of those broad strokes for our civic health and for our business health.
Thank you. Gina?
I don't think that any business or organization should ever shy away from having discussions about voting or encouraging participation from their employees, from their members. I think at the end of the day, these are community members. When we're talking about attracting businesses to the state of Arizona, we're hearing from these corporations, and one of the questions asked is, okay, what are the schools like? What are the schools like for my employees that I'm bringing in here to this state? What is the community like for them? What is their, well-being going to be like in this state? state, in the state of Arizona. Why should I bring my business here? And I think, the businesses that are here or come in need to continue on with that and allow their employees the opportunity to participate, to learn. And I think the distinction that you're hearing, and I agree with, is it's not to influence the choices that your employees or members are making, but it's to allow them to participate, to be informed. And the reference that Deanna made, there is a state statute that prevents government entities from expending funding to influence the results of an election. And so I think the same thing really applies here, is you're not, we shouldn't have folks telling their employees, okay, I'm going to give you time off to go vote, but only if you vote for, this candidate, that type of thing. But it needs to be more of, this is a community health situation. We are looking to, increase and strengthen democracy. And we as business leaders in the community need to play a part in that. We have a responsibility in that. And that means, I think, allowing your employees and encouraging that participation. And I don't think talking about politics, which is really governance, I think we need to step away from the negative connotation that politics has, that phrase, and really think at the end of the day, we're talking about how our government governs and makes decisions about our communities. And I don't think talking about that should ever be taboo. I think, dinner table, right? Is that discussion? Do we not talk politics or religion here? But we should, and we need to, part of that comes with having that civil discourse and being respectful to one another, because those are absolutely important discussions that need to take place. I know consistently when we do polling and we talk to voters, a top source cited for where do you get your election information from? Well, from my parents, from my family members. And so those discussions are happening. They need to happen. And I think we need to see that encouragement and that participation from our business communities and from our nonprofits. So again, it shouldn't be about shying away from the topic of voting because we think it's taboo or this negative connotation of partisanship with politics, but it's more about governance. It affects us all. It affects the health of us. And we need to have those informed discussions, but again, not to influence. And I think that's the distinction there.
Thank you so much. So fun fact for all of you, ARS 15-1408, university and community college officials cannot use any public resources to influence the outcome of an election. So I appreciate you drawing the distinction between influencing elections and being civically engaged. That is a skill set. As David said, that's a muscle we need to practice and a muscle that we need to fine tune. So again, thank you for drawing those distinctions. Now, if I had a magic wand, which I don't, but if I did, and appointed you each a king or queen for a day, unlimited resources, no state statutes governing what you can or cannot do, what is the one single thing that you would do around this issue? Voting and elections.
Thanks. Oh, I don't know what I'd do without you, Stephen. And so
Probably be flourish.
plead the fifth. And so it's a great question. So if I could be overlord or a king, matriarch, patriarch.
Probably is a little, softer connotation than overlord.
Yeah.
Let's go with king.
Feels
Mike.
heavy-handed, right? I want to be like a fun, happy king, right? Like I don't want to be a mean one. And so, anyways, with this, I really think the biggest opportunity to move the needle. I think one is again, it's got to be part of our foundational structure, right? Like for example, yes, we have civic engagement courses and stuff like that. Like they have some of the requirements over there, and high school, for example, kids have to go see items. But I think a couple of things. One is the content. And they say it's not as effective because of a lot of students will just go in there, kind of memorize the information, then go take the test. Right. And so, engaging them, make the topic interesting. And I think you can absolutely make the topic interesting. Again, play to your audience. If you're teaching it like they taught it 20 years ago, I think it's going to fall on deaf ears. But if you tailor it to the group of maybe trying to make it more digestible to them, say, hey, this is, the factor, this is the policy, whatever. By the way, it's kind of like this and something in pop culture that they can refer to, but they can kind of more quickly pick it up. I think that would be super impactful. Also, what about bringing experts in from the field, right? So not just teachers, right? You have the teachers doing it, but let's say you brought in experts such as Gina, Stephen, myself, or any of the folks, or even, Flynn Fellows, right? Them coming in there to talk about a little bit more real world, I think, to kind of capture their attention. I think would be helpful. And plus, you saw that, compared to just teaching them, it showed that folks were more engaged. There's a special program that they run in Arizona. What is it? The High School Civic Program Challenge. But then, their solution is, Arizona's been doing pioneering work on the school participatory
budgeting?
Yeah, it's not a day for me. School participatory budgeting spotlight, which empowers students to learn democracy by doing. So they kind of have them, play like their, I don't know, principal, or kind of, they're governing the school, right? But they actually like put it into action. It's kind of like when you took those financial classes and they, make you have the checkbook, right? And you sit there and you got to fill out your checkbook and all that stuff like that. Compared to just talking about it, like I feel, getting them to kind of engage more, which see better impacts. Either way, it comes back around to the fact of, tailoring the content to drill in not only the importance, but also for them to, realize, why it's important to be civic minded. And I think there's a ton of facts of why one should, frankly, but I think, starting there, and I think in the institutional area, if I had to pick a spot, I would probably pick there to start, because I feel like you could have the biggest gains. And frankly, I don't know, just revamp it a little bit. Anyways.
If offered the crown for a day, I hope I would decline. I think being a dictator, even for one day, as some have suggested, would be a negative thing for this country. Favorite president, I routinely point to George Washington, because I think what he did was so unique in the course of human history, and so unique in the course of just nation building, and walking away after 2 terms, even when people were willing to crown him King Washington. Two of my favorite characters in fantasy books, which some of you know is a passion of mine, is Frodo, who of course famously walks away from the ring, is willing to throw the ring into the fiery pits of Mordor, and turn away from that power. Harry Potter, of course, ultimately turns away from the Deathly Hallows, which makes one master of death. And so I think that is just such an important legacy for our country, that it's not even something that we should ever, in a slightly more serious manner, indulge. And I think that's really scary, and it is part of what makes the United States unique. But if forced, and I was, then I think prosaically, I would say everyone has to return their early ballots early. You need to get your early ballot back by Saturday before Election Day Tuesday, so that 8 p.m. on Tuesday night, we can have 99% of the results and everyone will be happy. Yay! Okay, so that, and then I think maybe more grandiose, I would change the incentive structure. I think that politicians right now have an incentive structure that encourages them to throw grenades into a room, run to the local cable news network, pitch to their base, ramp up their fundraising, and not be a serious politician who thinks about serious issues and works in a serious manner. John Kyle, who was one of the people who mentored me when I first got into politics, and is somebody that I have great amount of respect for. He said, there are 3 types of horses in politics. He says there's the work horses, what you should aspire to be. There's the show horses who just prance about but don't do much. And then there's the horses' asses. And I think that we are increasingly moving to a world in which we have the latter 2 more than the first one, because I don't think that we're rewarding the workhorses.
I'll agree a lot with what Mike has said, because you'll hear me harp on civic education all day long. Our K through 12 civics, you'll read in the report about how Arizona has been a leader on that front in some sense. And I really do think that, looking at the root of the issue, we're not just talking about future voters when we talk about civic education, we're also talking about future candidates. And I think that's important too. And I think a part of that includes, again, yes, there's, participatory, can't say it either, participatory budgeting is very important, because it gives those students that hands-on approach and they see that ROI in their process. But I think also, having those hands-on demonstrations to the voting process is important. But with that I think is very important in our education for our students is problem solving and continuing to strengthen and identify, okay, what's the problem? Define the issue and then go through those steps of problem solving, finding the solutions, selecting your solution, doing the analyzing of it. And the reason why I think that is so important is because, again, we have the actual process of voting, but civic engagement is so much more than that process. It's one step. And it's the problem solving where we can really look to having that we society, where we see an issue in our community, we identify the problem and we know where to go. Do I need to talk to, the person who is on my school board? Do I need to talk to my state legislature? Who do I talk to with this issue? And that's one thing I see from voters all the time in our communication is, I've got this issue, I don't know where to go in my government. And this is what we're talking about, politics and governance. And so making sure that our future voters and our future candidates are well informed on politics in general, that aspect of voting and that civics education, how to be engaged in your community, which I think, again, ultimately lends to that we society instead of an I society, but also the problem solving component of it and how to engage with your government. So it's, again, not just ending at the ballot box with your choice, with filling in the bubble. It's what happens after that I think is so important. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me in this report, because I hear it continuously, is my vote doesn't matter. What is the qualification to make your vote matter? What is the criteria for it? And one, we have to know that it counts, right? But then two, I know that it shouldn't be just that your preferred candidate won. It's got to be more than that to know that your vote truly matters. And I think it's those steps outside of voting that lend to that, knowing that I continue to engage with my representatives after the fact will bring me more of that ROI on it and ultimately turn around and help me want to vote again in the next election. So I would go back to my magic wand, queen for the day. I would again strengthen our civics education for our students and add more to that with problem solving, learning how to engage your governing bodies. And also, again, I think civil discourse is so important. I mentioned earlier in the question about, not shying away from talking about politics or voting, but let's be real, it's hard, right? How do we have a conversation about abortion with a family member if we're on the opposite sides of it, because it's deeply personal, and keeping things respectful? And so we have to have those civil discourse skills that we need to teach our students as well to allow for those discussions that need to happen.
Great answer. Thanks, Gina. The idea of skill set is really, I think, important when we talk about education, rather than, Mike, what you said, the idea of rote memorization, which is another thing that's mentioned in the background report. So again, I encourage you to all go read that. And it's not lost on me that Town Hall engages in civil discourse across our entire state. So the very fact that people are brought together to talk about voting and elections in a way that models the skill set that we want them to have, I think is another thing that's worth noting here in this. So Mike, you look like you wanted to jump on something though.
I just had two quick things on it. One is and again, I think it's kind of just adapting to our new normal, because I don't know about you all, especially in the last 10 years, oh my gosh, we've had so many changes, right? For example, let's just look in the public opinion polling space. You see, before it just used to be live caller polls and IVR, right? Now you have text online, you got these opt-in panels. I can't get someone under 35 or someone under 30 years old to talk to a live human. I think they'd rather jump off a cliff compared to, but they'll text you all day. It's interesting with, so I think one is adapting, and I think if I could use Gina in her organization, for example, Clean Elections. For example, they're doing these debates, right? They're doing these debates across the state, but again, they're being very smart about it, where they're trying to tailor the content to your audience, right? So when you're talking, let's say, I don't know, in a rural district, the issues are going to be a little different than, let's say, in an urban center, or if it's more Democratic, more Republican. So again, the right message to the right audience, right? And I think part of this is really following the data and having a pulse on your folks of what do they want, and if you're not getting them what they'd like, because look at the damage done to elections, right? I mean, Arizona, let's not kid ourselves. We have one of the best election systems probably in the country. I mean, we're right up there, up top, right? Yeah, right. somewhat because of this guy, mainly the other folks, but predecessors. But no, it's funny, and you look at all the stuff that Stephen has been running onto. So not only did he, he ran as a Republican, he didn't even administer that election. But yet a lot of folks he's on their hit list or whatever, because again, it's just because of how political it's gone. And one of the pages in there, in that research brief about midway through, there's a really starking chart on there talking about, like election integrity. What are people's perceptions and attitudes on election integrity? And you look at that and you can't but pull away, like anything that becomes partisan is that it's going to look like the numbers on that chart. And when you look at it, Republicans, vast majority, I think it's 7 and 10, think don't have confidence in elections, where the Democrats, it's literally the inverse of that. 7 and 10 are confident, 30% not. Independents are kind of somewhere in between, but lightly lean a little bit more towards the confidence end. But look at all that damage it's done to the system. And it kind of blows my mind because, for example, I was talking to a gal, just moved here from Utah. She's been, 10 years. Utah is a very Republican state. Came out to Arizona, started talking to her briefly about elections. And anyway, she's like, Kari Lake would have won if it, if they didn't steal the election because they didn't clean up the voter rolls. And I'm like, okay, sounds great. I've heard that talking point before. It's just simply not true. And this is a fellow colleague, another entrepreneur member that's in here. And so I was chatting with her in my most polite way possible. I was like, the biggest issue I've seen is there's a lot of really smart folks that frankly have a false perception of what the truth is. And it's just crazy to me, or someone like her, she's really smart and all this other stuff, but you could tell immediately I said in my nicest way possible saying it, I could tell in her eyes, I was dead to her. And I swear, and here as a colleague, I'm an expert in space. And again, very, kind the way I kind of posed it to her, but she wasn't even having any of it. Right. And I think that's one of the biggest threats, because look at how much damage was done with one person with a megaphone. Right. And we got megaphones here, right? But it's not as big as, let's say, I don't know, a president or someone like that. But like, look at the damage that it's caused already. So again, I think it kind of pulls back to like, again, the more engaged, the more talk about, because if we're not engaged about it, look at how quickly that can turn. Because when I see those numbers, I just think it's a bunch, like, that's just ridiculous to me that people are basically, it's like a huge chunk of the electorate believing the earth is flat. Like, it's just crazy to me. Anyway, sorry, I'll end my rant.
No, that's you've mentioned a couple of items that I want to pull out, Mike, that you are very good at articulating the differences in terms of opinions and perspectives from different groups, different ages. What about when we think of Arizona and its geography? So we often get teased about the great state of Maricopa, but Arizona has a lot more to it than just the great state of Maricopa, right? So when we talk about elections, voting, civic skills, what are some of the differences that you see across the state? When you talk about your colleagues, the work that you do, certainly Town Hall engages in statewide conversations, which can vary drastically depending on geography and where those conversations are taking place. So from each of your seats, what are some of the nuances that you see across Arizona when we think about urban centers, rural communities, and places outside of Maricopa?
I think that's a very important item to consider, because, we have rules and procedures in place to ensure that voting is, as consistent as possible for every voter that participates. But of course, geography plays a role in that. So we have our 15 counties. Some counties are vote centers, some counties are polling places, some are a hybrid. We have in our rural areas, we have issues with non-standard addresses for our folks who live on tribal communities, on tribal lands. We have issues with broadband access. And so all of that can impact the voting process. And I think when we talk about voting and participation, it's important to acknowledge what some of those logistical challenges can be with voting. And I think that, becomes incumbent upon the election administrators to take those into account, to talk to the community to make sure, one, that access is available to the voting process. And then two, I think we also need to look at the communities and the culture and be respectful of that. Because again, when we're talking about maybe some of our Native American communities and looking at, okay, what is your election day going to look like? Because you have your state elections, but you also have your tribal elections that you're voting in, and why it's important to vote in both, and understanding what this means, again, as this community aspect. And again, maybe some of our tribal communities prefer to show up on election day because they feel more connected and seeing their neighbors and their family members, and they can all drive down together. As opposed to maybe if we're in Maricopa County and we see, a high percentage of folks who are using their early ballot and prefer to vote by mail. So I think geography absolutely plays a role in the voting process, both from the logistical standpoint, but also the cultural standpoint, and how these voters want to participate and how they get access to their information. So as Mike had mentioned, one of the things that we're doing at Clean Elections is we put out a survey to talk to voters about what are the issues that are important to you. And we did this as much as we could by region, because again, we know it's not just the great state of Maricopa, but we need to make sure that when we're having discussions in our legislative debates or our congressional debates, that the issues are relevant to the voters in those communities. So what's happening in Yuma County right now that you care about? What's happening in Greenlee that you care about right now that you want the people who are asking for your vote to talk to you about? So one, it's communicating with the people in those communities, understanding what issues are important to them and having those conversations. But again, also making sure that we know what are those logistical barriers that may make it more difficult for them to vote, and how do we address those? One is election officials, but maybe also as policymakers. And again, the culture of it too. So I can tell you, with Clean Elections and the voter education campaign that we do, the outreach, we right now are looking at every opportunity that we can to get digital or standard billboards in our Native American communities and radio reads, because we know those are going to be the most effective methods for us to have touch points with the people in those communities than just relying on the internet and relying on social media, where it's spotty and that may not be the best effort. So we have to, again, understand those communities, the realities that they live in, and how can we adapt to reach them for encouraging that voting and encouraging that participation in the political process.
Thanks, Gina.
So election administration is actually one of the last vestiges of federalism, in that every jurisdiction does it a little bit different. The law is largely driven by state law. So we have 50 states that all do it a little bit different. And that can create some confusion, but it also means that there's no one switch that you can flip that throws an entire election system. And so when you talk about grand global schemes, just imagine that you're doing that across 8,000 voting jurisdictions, and they're all running on different systems. They're all doing it a little bit differently. But in the election administration world, we've actually been emphasizing commonalities. I'm a elected Republican. It's tempting to say, well, guys, you can have trust here. But in Los Angeles, where Dean Logan is, he's a Democrat, and we're pretty skeptical of anything Los Angeles anyways. Or in Michigan with Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who's a Democrat. But we have realized, I think it's been impressed upon us over the last 3 years, that we rise or fall as a national team. And that's certainly true of the Arizona team, so the 15 different counties. And so while we all do it a little bit differently, I like to emphasize some commonalities. There is no election jurisdiction in the United States that is run only by Republicans or only by Democrats. There's bipartisanship built into every single election jurisdiction in the United States. There is no election jurisdiction in the United States that simply turns on a tabulator or a computer and says, hope it works well. Every single jurisdiction in the United States has some testing requirements built into it. There is no jurisdiction in the United States that says, no, this process is not for the voters and you absolutely cannot see. So every single voting jurisdiction in the United States has opportunities for observation, opportunities for transparency, whether that's political party observers, whether that's working the process, whether that's going online to live video stream cameras, or whether that's showing up to the actual voting location. And so I hope that knowing that it's bipartisan, knowing that it's tested, knowing that it's transparent, means that even if you see Arizona doing something differently than Pennsylvania, or even if you see Coconino County doing something different from Yuma County, that you'll know that those basic guardrails are in place and therefore have confidence in the election system. And that's important because I can tell you a lot of my colleagues throughout the country are sick of hearing about Maricopa County. They're sick of hearing about Maricopa County because they'll be asked about it. And I promise you that if there's a theory about Fulton County in Georgia, I'll be asked about it. And so that's why we've got to point out those commonalities that are built in to make sure that all jurisdictions have some basic safeguards.
I heard a rumor that you're gonna take the election job at Graham County.
Graham County? I don't even know where that is.
Hey, folks following the news over at Graham. Anyways, one of you in this room could be the fourth elections director that they've had in the last
Oh,
like.
Cochise.
Oh, is it Cochise?
Yeah.
It-
I do know where that.
One of the, they can't give away that job apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, all right, so colleagues up here on the panel, I think both brought up some really great things, you know, Gina's right message, right audience, again, understanding it. Again, like in that report, no surprise that all the traditional methods, again, for let's say more folks that are middle-aged, but definitely older folks, they're more used to just traditional modes of communication, you know, talking to someone, direct mail, etc. Younger folks, I don't think they know where their mailbox is. And so you would have like, but for them, it predominantly their information comes from friends, family, or social media. So it's also adapting this new normal of the content. So like, for example, we know with the electorate, there's two things they want. One is they want access or like convenience, right? So remember the whole talk about a few years ago about getting rid of early voting? Holy crap, that was such a dumb political idea, frankly, because when you look at the numbers, most were like, no, I like the convenience of getting that ballot and doing it compared to I have to do it on one day and get in line and do all that stuff. Let's be honest, we've been accustomed to convenience. So, and you look at the stats, like just look at independents and their participation in primaries. I mean, any given primary, it's roughly about 10% in, let's say, a Republican or Democratic primary that you'd have of that total vote in the primary, about 10% would be independents, right? And even though there's a ton of independents, especially in Maricopa County, is that yet there's the turnout's abysmally low. Like they can do it, but yet but here's the thing. There's just one extra step if you want to vote in that process, right? And that's you got to request a ballot. You're like, oh, seems simple enough. Go online, a couple clicks, I'm there, right? But just that one extra step, look how much that prevents people from doing it. And we've seen time and time again, the more you can make this accessible and for folks to do it. And of course, then you hear from both sides, because here's the thing, it's a red team and blue team out there right now. I know No Labels just was created, but they have a little bit long road to build. The other parties have like hundreds of years of infrastructure already built up, but there's a game between two people. And again, whether it's going to benefit one or detract from the other. And depending how it's go, that's where they're going to take their positions on it. And that's why it's been tougher with reform, like saying, oh, we don't want this. Like, well, we don't want folks like, let's say they wanted to do away with early voting. Why would you do away with something like 80% of the electorate likes, like really likes? Like, that's crazy. And yet, you know, but these are some of the craziness that we're seeing in politics compared to like, you know, I think the other aspect too is that security. Like I feel like what Steve was talking, and I love you, Stephen. Let me preface it with that. I love you. And basically, though, like you're talking this stuff, you know, like how you say like how people are viewing elections, like hey, it's all nonpartisan, etc. I don't think that's probably held by the probably the vast majority of the public, and I don't think it's wrong on yourself on that point. I think it's just more of the education aspect, because at least from my perspective, at least when talking about elections, because elections is complicated, right? Like if you go down and you know go do if you haven't had a chance, if you want to go down and do a tour of Maricopa County elections to see how that works, Stephen, I think you took me on a couple of years ago, and it's fascinating when you go in there. Like there's a lot that goes into it. Like a lot, but people don't, they're just seeing these like buzzy one-liners and stuff like that compared to like seeing it. And I think the only thing is that information, having it, but also trying to be a little more, I think, proactive on it. Like I could see like, for example, would be really cool. Like for example, like SpaceX, I'll give that. Sorry, I'm a big Elon Musk fan. And so the business side, I don't like this politics. I was like, yeah, don't do that. Stick to what you're good at. And so it's interesting, like you look at like space, like anything new, right? Like let's say, I don't know, traveling to space or Mars, right? Like, okay, you're really going to like, but there's a lot of uncertainty issues, like you gotta be cautious. There's a lot of misunderstanding about it. But I think what they've done is such a great job educational. And I think why they've had the momentum they've had, like you watch them, they'll live cast those rocket launches, right? Well, what if they live casted the election night, right? Like you have it and talking about the process. So, all right, we're in this phase right now, right? Like when you watch that thing, like, all right, we're getting prepped for launch, blah, blah, blah. They're saying some technical terms and then they'll digest it down. But again, they kind of hourly engage folks, but they get tons of views, et cetera. But I think that they've really done a lot of good of educating folks because they'll launch a rocket and it'll blow up on live stream. Like most people would not want to do that, but they've been incredibly, I think, transparent and very proactive about that transparency. So I think there's some opportunities there, frankly, and trying to make it a little more digestible because I found when you dig into the policy with folks, with regular voters, I would say, is that it's hard to get in the weeds, frankly, with them. So you kind of gotta, summarize it a little bit more digestibly, I would say.
So thanks for bringing it back to education. So as an educator, that makes me happy. Appreciate that, Mike. So we have some questions that will be asked during our community town halls all across the state to engage citizens and residents from a wide variety of perspectives around voting and elections. So I'm going to toss a couple your way so we can get a little preview of what the types of discussions might be out about in our varied communities. So first one, Gina, if we could start with you. What constitutes an effective democracy? And how important is it to us individually, a state, nation?
I think an effective democracy is where we have this, we place the value on it in the first place, that it is something that is discussed in our homes and taught to our children, that there is value in contributing and being a good citizen to your community, to society. So I think it comes to identifying, recognizing, and implementing those values and making them precious. I think that if we have those values instilled in us at a young age, I think we're going to grow up and we're going to make it a priority in our lives to commit our time to civic engagement, whether that's, voting, or it's, volunteering, or it's running for office. So I think that is what gives us really an effective, a successful, and a healthier democracy, is when we have this collective shared value on making our world a better place. I mean, I know that sounds cheesy a little bit there, but I think at the end of the day, we all have to have that commitment to one another. And again, this goes back to, I said it before, but we don't want to be in an I society. We want to make sure that we're in a we society, that we care about our neighbors. And so I think an effective democracy, it has to, again, going to the root cause of things, we have to have those values instilled in us at a young age. And I think that will, when we grow up and we, are eligible to vote, we become 18, even when we're in high school, and we're being able to do volunteer hours, all of those things where we can contribute to our society, it stems from having those values placed inside of us at a young age. So I think, obviously we have the data, we want to look at the data to know that we have this healthy democracy. We want to look at voter turnout, things like that. I think even, I love data. I'm a data nerd. So as quantifying it as much as we can, how many people called Recorder Richard, and emailed his office? Thousands upon thousands, I'm sure, of communication from constituents he's received. And I think that's important, looking at how many people are reaching out to their state senators or state representatives. And so I think, the numbers there are important for us to track and understand and analyze. And I think, those numbers are reflective of a healthy democracy, showcases us, that to us. But I think at the end of the day, what really leads us to that is having those shared values and teaching our children that, and teaching them, again, this is why it's important to contribute to your community and be a good citizen. So I think, going back to your specific question of that, what makes a healthy, a successful democracy is where we all can agree that it's important that we contribute to society.
Thanks, Gina. Stephen, you want to tackle this one? Effective democracy?
You know it when you see it. No, there are some metrics. There are some metrics that study the well-being of democracy, and like any measurement, it's subject to analysis, to criticism. But what concerns me more is that by all of those metrics, democracy is in decline around the world right now. And that bucks a trend that had been steady, consistent since the end of the Second World War, and especially since the end of the Cold War, that was very favorable to the expansion of democracy. But I think we see now a lot of countries saying, is this the path we want to take? Is this really so great? And I think that no country defines democracy more than the United States. And to this extent that we're questioning democracy, to the extent, to harken back on a previous question, where you might have a percentage of Americans who say, actually sign me up for a dictatorship, actually sign me up for a king, then I think that the rest of the world gets its cues from the United States. And if they say, if even the beacon of democracy isn't so keen on democracy these days, then maybe we shouldn't put our lives on the line to try to prevent an incoming country from attacking us or overthrow a dictatorial regime. Because that seems like a lot of risk. And if it's not a lot of reward, then maybe not so much. So I'm disturbed by those trends, but I do think that they can be reversed in large part by the leadership of the United States.
Thanks, Stephen, for putting it into some global context for thoughtful discussion. Mike, effective democracy, what do you say?
All right. So effective democracy, I think Gina really hit the nail on the head. It comes back to, it's a value, right? The I society or we society, right? And I think we can all agree, probably in the last decade or so, I think culturally we have moved more towards that I statement. What is this going to do for me? Well, how is this impacting me compared to, again, thinking more about the community aspect or kind of that broader realm. So I just think the value is the number one, in my opinion, that will protect the system. Because here's the thing, we're seeing a ridiculous amount of degradation to institutional integrity. And, you know, whether you agree with them or not, but the thing is that the institutions are there because you need that for a functioning democracy. But if you don't have confidence in the game, like think of like, I don't know, playing Monopoly and the banker person that's doing that role, like, known to cheat. Again, you're less likely to want to play, and you know what I mean? It's so like, you got to have confidence, because if you don't have confidence in the game, you don't then have a game to play anymore. So anyways, goes back to values. I think that's truly there. Just getting folks of civic minded, like it's a privilege. Like, for example, like you have, I have a friend that we will call and he rants about whatever political issue topic of today, and says he knows I'm in the space. He of course calls me. And so he rants about it or whatever. And he goes, and then the election comes and I call him and I'm like, hey, did you end up voting? And he goes, something came up, I didn't vote. And I go, all right. And so I have a rule with folks now.
Something came up for 27 days.
I digress. And so, but for him, it's like, you're sitting there ranting about all these things, all these issues. And I'm like, you didn't even participate. I'm like, no offense, I don't think you should be able to speak, basically, until you go vote next time, right? And I think that's one of the things, though, too, is that, like, when folks talk about, oh, my vote doesn't matter, or whatever, I say, all right, BS, in my opinion, because, all right, look at Arizona. Last election, Kerry Lake lost the governor's race by 30,000 votes, millions of votes, but yet 30,000, that's close. But, the presidential contest, it was 11,000 votes. Like, and literally Arizona is at its political apex of competitiveness. Like, literally what's going to happen here not only affects us here directly, ultimately may end up deciding who sits in the White House. Like, we may be the linchpin on the road to 270, but then also like the balance of power in the U.S. Senate and the balance of power in Congress. Like, and like you look it up and down, plus of these initiatives coming, et cetera, and the balance of power in the state house, state legislature. Republicans have had a majority for decades now, but they have a chance to possibly lose it, this time, which would be a big shift that we haven't seen in decades. And that will really change the dynamics of the state. So when you look at, I guess, democracy in action, I feel like this topic, this discussion, this has never been more, it's been important, right? But leading up to this election, I just think it is invariably important that we're engaged doing this because, again, we're at a crossroads. And one side's going to win out, one's going to the other, and it's going to define us for some time. So the question is, which route are we going? And so, and then the last thing is like, from a higher level, let's say national. I do have concerns about national because, as Stephen pointed out a couple questions back, is that you're getting these folks like the Majority Green Taylors of the world, these others, like when you're one of 400 some members in Congress, right? It seems like you're coming out with a great practical plan, like, hey, here's my solution. And it just gets, that's boring. But then you go in there and say something kind of really wild off the cuff statement, but that gets attention. I mean, what are you telling other colleagues there? Like, hey, if you want to get noticed or you want to get out there, you got to say some crazy stuff. And like, I feel like that's not a great trend. And of course, it's kind of, they're getting incentivized for it in the media, et cetera. So I think also part of it's on the media a little bit as well that, not, I guess, doing that. So someone says a crazy statement compared to someone like, I don't know, a great plan to like, I don't know, fix, for water or something like that. It's just, it kind of just bugs me a little bit of the systemic, they're kind of feeding the fire, so to speak. So anyway, so good.
So what you're saying, Mike, is effective democracy has to be boring.
A
A little bit more boring rather than just throwing the grenades into the room. I think that's what you said earlier, Stephen, and waiting for reaction. Effective democracy has to actually lead to good governance.
Well, so you look at,
is that what I'm hearing?
yeah,
from
but like,
folks?
but you're seeing this trend right now play out. Like, look at just recently, like, what was it, 3-4 months ago, Republicans, when Speaker McCarthy was heading it up, they were about to get the best border deal that's happened in decades. For them, for border security, the visa process, all this stuff. It wasn't perfect, but it's literally in 20 years, like nothing. And border's been, especially here in Arizona, such a pain point and issue. Question, they had the opportunity to get it done. Like even Kirsten Sinema worked, I think that was what she was going to kind of leave out on. It's like, hey, I'm going to overhaul immigration. Good. She worked on it for months. Should have been a good deal. That thing got killed within a day or so. And it's crazy. And of course, she announced her, not seeking re-election like a week later. But it's just nuts to see like how politically, because what happened is if they would have solved immigration, that would have taken that issue off the table, which right now Trump has inflation or economy and immigration is too, or Democrats have abortion. But it would have taken that win off for the campaign. So basically for a personal thing, it would have had a less of an advantage for him. But at the end of the day, was that better for him or is it better for the country, right? But you're seeing these decisions being made where they're not willing to solve problems because they're sitting there playing politics. Like, wasn't your job to legislate and provide solutions?
So thank you for that.
Sorry.
I'm going to let Gina have kind of a closing comment on this question, and then we're going to lead to a wrap up. But I appreciate that we're seeing this trend and conversation from our panelists here, the difference between the politics of it and effective engagement and effective democracy, and the skill set that we need to engage effectively, have civil dialogue, and how there can be that distinction between the politics. Gina, you've been trying to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to really highlight something that Mike said that I think is critical right now. And, he talked about the potential shift in the balance of power. When we look at what's going to be on our ballot this year, and with the partisan makeup of the state, it is absolutely, where every vote matters. So whatever your partisan values are, whatever your political values are, this is an important election. When you look at, this potential shift in power for the legislature, when you look at, we have an open US Senate seat, those are 6-year term limits. 6 years, our next US Senator will be in office for. And then of course our Congress and legislature are 2 years. So it is a very important election. And I think just highlighting what Mike said in that every vote makes a difference. And we look at how close each of the races have been recently in Arizona, your vote matters right now. It is very important. And we will see changes, potentially with voter turnout. Hopefully we see an increase because it'll be a presidential election year. But just knowing how important your vote can impact, again, that balance of power in the state of Arizona, I think is very critical right now. So if anything, that could be a big motivator for people to turn out this election cycle. It doesn't matter what side of the owl that you're on, your vote matters and it's important to the community. So I'll leave you with that. Now's a great time, a great year to be voting.
How about we give a huge round of applause for our panelists today? Not only have they given us their time, their expertise, their insights, but certainly they have launched what I think is going to be a series of very invigorating discussions across the entire state of Arizona. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tara Jackson to close us out today.
Thank you so much, Deanna. What a panel, right? So a couple of quick things. I mean, what a fabulous discussion. So many tidbits here that are important from this panel. We've recorded this. This will be on our YouTube channel, so it will be a resource for others who could not be here with us today. So I really want to thank the panel and Deanna for facilitating the discussion. And then a reminder and a thank you to the Morrison Institute for this incredibly valuable resource. Did you notice how thin it is if you're in the room? It is so much harder to put together a good background report that is short and concise and informative. And what an amazing job. What happens next? Anyone who knows me, well, first of all, here's some upcoming events for those in the room, but we already have some dates for community town halls. A few of those are on here. There are a gazillion more, that is an official number, a gazillion more in the works around the state. There are some other programs we have coming up as well. I certainly encourage you to go to our website and be a part of those. But what I was going to say is anyone who knows me well is I am a proud nerd, right? I know we have a few in the room, and I'm always reading a book or listening to one is often the way I do it these days. And there's a concept that might be known by a lot of you. I'm just learning about it, a scientific concept called emergence. Think about, some of you may know about it, how ants and bees are able to survive and thrive for generations. And it is this concept that also is how we have computers and the internets, that it's not always about the top down. We often think about the top down in leadership and in policy, but what really allows ants and bees and our computer systems to work is from the bottom up. Emergence from the bottom up with simple rules like, honesty, simple rules like engagement, the golden rule, which is common throughout so many cultures. And so I would certainly encourage all of you, as you think about these very challenging issues that we're going to be facing, and the fact that Arizona is going to be in the midst and the crosshairs of so much, this concept of emergence and how you and within your realm and communities can be a part of keeping our communities strong, our state strong, and because of where we stand this year, our nation and even the world, thank you all for bringing that up, it is important, strong by valuing coming together, by valuing the greater community and each being a part of it. One way you can do that is through these community town halls where this was a fabulous, fabulous panel, but at a community town hall, it's all of you talking and engaging and working with your community around the state. So feel free to contact us or to reach out to us if you want to be a part of that. We have some partners in the room who are going to help us do that throughout the state. And once again, thanks to all of you, whether you're here in person, for our wonderful panel and for all of you supporting this work. Thank you.